Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a really passionate debate from the BBC's World Questions Kenya. It's a face-off between a new generation that's completely fed up and the leaders they're demanding answers from. Let's get right into it.
So what's at the heart of all this tension? Well, it's this huge contradiction. On one hand, you've got this vision of Kenya as a major player in East Africa, a tech hub that everyone's kind of jealous of. But then on the flip side, there's this really grim reality. The country is failing its most important resource, its own young people.
And this right here, this is the number that's fueling so much of the anger. A jaw-dropping 2/3 of young Kenyans don't have a job. Just think about that. You have a whole generation, 1 million new people hitting the job market every single year, totally ready to work, only to find out there's just nothing there for them.
And this is where it all comes to a head. It's a clash between a generation of self-proclaimed hustlers, the exact people President Ruto built his campaign on empowering, and a government that they now feel has completely let them down.
Okay, so the first major flashpoint in this whole debate comes down to leadership. Is the political class failing the country, or, as some of them argue, is it actually the citizens who are part of the problem?
This whole intense debate really kicked off with this simple question from a guy in the audience. Young Kenyans are looking at a political class they see as corrupt and only out for themselves, and they're not just protesting anymore. They're demanding totally new ways of leading the country.
And the answers from the panelists were just fascinating. First, you had a religious leader, Evans Omolo, who called for servant leadership, kind of like what Nelson Mandela preached. Then, opposition leader Martha Karua said, hey, we need to get back to constitutionalism, arguing that the country's just thrown the rule of law out the window. And then a youth activist, Zaha Ndamuli, she took it a step further. She basically called for getting rid of the entire political elite.
But then, the government's representative, he took a completely different tack. The majority chief whip, Silvanus Osoro, stood up and argued that the leadership isn't the problem at all. He basically said the solution is for the people to change their own mindset and stop blaming politicians for their problems.
But look, this debate goes way beyond just a war of words. It got much, much darker, turning to a rising climate of fear, with protesters claiming that when they speak out, they're met with really brutal force.
And we're not just talking about vague fears here. The Kenyan Human Rights Commission has put some truly chilling numbers to this. Just in 2024, they've documented 159 cases of extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearances. And get this, 55 of those are classified as abductions.
And Canon Evans Omolo, he really brought the human cost of these numbers home for everyone. He talked about personally counseling families of people who were taken, describing how his own friends and members of his church were snatched, only to be dumped miles from their homes later.
And this is where you can really see how the two sides are living in completely different realities. What the government calls a legal arrest that follows due process, its critics call a state-sanctioned abduction, an illegal act meant to shut people up. They can't even agree on the basic words to describe what's happening.
So when he's confronted with all this, what does the government representative say? Well, his denial was absolute. He insisted, straight up, there is no such thing as a state-sanctioned abduction in Kenya. Period.
All right, so from there, the debate shifted to the thing that's really lighting the fire under all these protests, the economy. Is the path forward all about individual hard work, about hustling, or is the whole system so broken that it needs to be torn down and rebuilt from scratch?
And to really understand this economic debate, check out this absolutely wild statistic from a recent Oxfam report. Just 125 people in Kenya own more wealth than 43 million of their fellow citizens, combined. That's a level of inequality that is it's hard to even wrap your head around.
So the big question is, how do you even begin to fix a problem that huge? Well, the panel offered two totally opposite solutions. On one side, Martha Karua argued for systemic change, restructure taxes, make the rich pay their share, and stop spending public money on the flashy lifestyles of the political elite. On the other side, Silvanus Osoro argued it's all about individual effort. You got to be creative, you got to hustle.
And the government's whole philosophy, it really got boiled down into this one pretty intense quote. Osoro said the answer isn't to change the system. It's for people to stop sleeping and, in his words, go out and work and hustle.
And yeah, as you can probably guess, that message did not land well with the audience. One young woman named Abigail stood up and called it incredibly disrespectful, pushing back hard on this idea that Kenyans are somehow lazy or just waiting for a handout.
But maybe the single most powerful comeback of the whole night was also the simplest. Another audience member looked right at the government representative and asked,
You keep telling us, wake up, go and work. Where? That one word, where, it just perfectly captures the frustration of a generation that feels like all the doors have been slammed shut in their faces.
So where does that leave us? After all the arguments, all the anger, and all the raw emotion, you're basically left with two completely different visions of Kenya, somehow trying to exist in the same country. And this slide right here, this is the whole conflict in a nutshell. On one side, the government sees a country where the constitution works, the leadership is fine, and the real problem is people's mindsets. On the other side, the youth see a country where the constitution is ignored, the system is rigged against them, and the state uses violence to stay in power. It seems like they can't even agree on what country they're living in.
And that leaves us with this final, really critical question. When the people in power and the generation that has to live with their decisions are operating from two completely different sets of facts, how can they possibly find a path forward together? That's the challenge and, honestly, the crisis facing Kenya right now.